Dear friends, on this third Sunday of Lent, the Gospel reading puts before us a meeting between two people from very different tribes, from very different background, the Jewish Jesus and of course the Samaritan woman. It brings us to a well in a Samaritan town where a tired and thirsty Jesus asks a woman for a drink. Notice what is at the heart of this encounter: water, one of the most precious gifts on earth, essential for life. Yet in many parts of the world, it is still rare and difficult to obtain. The Gospel reading described the place of this encounter around the word well. I connect more with what we call, in my own context, river. Actually, I grew up in a village where the river was about 30 kilometers away. Sometimes we walked, sometimes we rode old bicycles along dusty paths, carrying empty containers and bundles of clothes. When we arrived, the river greeted us with the cool sound of flowing water and the laughter of people already gathered there. I remember very well, we washed our clothes there, we bathed in the same clear water, and we filled our containers with the water we will carry back home on our heads, basically for cooking. For us children, it was more than a task. It was a moment of joy and innocence, a chance to run barefoot on the sand, to feel the freshness of the water on our skin, to laugh with friends under the open sky. The river was alive, and we could notice that even as kids. It gathered people from many villages, women, farmers, hunters, travelers passing through. In fact, anyone in need of water and refreshment. Conversations flowed freely. You were expected to meet neighbors, strangers, and sometimes lifelong friends there. It was a point of encounter. I still remember this. We were connected to each other without internet anyway. In a quiet way, that river was for me a sacred place of encounter, a place of meeting, of life, of community, where barriers disappeared and where everyone came with the same simple need: to drink, to be refreshed, fetch some water for cooking, and to return home renewed. And perhaps those who have never known such a place may not realize how much life can gather around water. Yet it is precisely such a place that today's gospel invites us to imagine when Jesus sits beside the well. In his own context, he calls it well. 30, waiting for someone to come. As I reflect on the river of my childhood and the well in today's gospel, I am also aware how differently many of us experience water today. Here in Europe, we are fortunate to live in a place where clean water flows at the turn of a tap in our homes. I personally benefit from this. We rarely have to think about it because it's there. It is simply there, waiting for us, waiting to be used. Yet, it was not always that way. And in many parts of the world, it is still not the case. I remember during my years as a missionary in the Democratic Republic of Congo how precious water was for so many families. And one of the most important services that we provided as missionaries was digging of wells so that people can have access to fresh, safe water to drink. This was not just a technical project, I believe. It becomes a source of life for the people who were around us, a source of energy for the people who were around us. Women and children no longer have to walk for hours to reach a river. People gather again around that well, a place of meeting, conversations, and shared life, very much like the village river of my childhood, and very much like the well in today's gospel, where Jesus, tired and thirsty, meets the Samaritan woman. Around water, my dear friends, life gathers. Around water, strangers become neighbors. And sometimes, as the gospel shows us today, around water, hearts can begin to open to God. Dear friends, I begin with these simple memories of rivers, of wells, of people meeting around water, and perhaps the first, they sound very ordinary. Telling you my stories could look maybe or sound very ordinary. For some, a river is just a river. Meeting someone at a well is just part of daily life. Yet the gospel invites us to pay attention to something very important. These ordinary places we journey to every day are often the very places where the Lord chooses to meet us, the very places where the Lord chooses to encounter us. Notice that in the gospel reading, Jesus does not meet the Samaritan woman in the temple or in some sacred shrine. I'm not against going to the temple, going to churches, going to chapel and oratories for prayers. No. But what I want to put across is that he meets her on her own ground in Samaritan territory at a place that was completely familiar to her, the town well, where she probably came every day to draw water. Jesus enters her life exactly as it is, with all its wounds, its confusion, and its imperfections. In a very concrete way, we see what St. John proclaims at the beginning of his gospel. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. God does not remain distant. In Jesus, God steps into the ordinary rhythms of human life. Dear friends, this is how the Lord relates to each of us today. He meets us within our own experiences. He comes, as it were, into the places we know well, our homes, our workplaces, our streets, our journeys, even the quiet routines of our days. We do not need to travel somewhere special for God can meet us where we are. We do not need to look for him where he is not. We do not need to look for him in material things of the world. We do not need to become perfect before he approaches us. No. The Lord always comes to where we are. Sometimes, like the Samaritan woman, we may even be surprised to discover that he has been waiting there all along. She came to the well simply to draw water. It was part of our daily routine, of course. Nothing extraordinary, we can say. Yet that ordinary moment became the turning point of her life because there she encountered the Messiah. Or rather, we could say the Messiah encountered her. The ordinary path she walked that day became a sacred meeting place where God was. The truth remains, therefore, the same. God often chooses the ordinary moments of our lives to touch us most deeply. I think of the bus stop, the kitchen, the table, the workshop, the workplaces, a quiet walk, morning masses, a simple conversation, a simple smile. These too can become wells where Christ is waiting for us. And when Jesus meets, another interesting thing, when Jesus meets the woman at the well, he reveals something even more beautiful about the way God approaches us. At first, he says, "Give me a drink." But almost immediately, it becomes clear that he is not there to take something from the woman, from her. He is there to give. He speaks of the living water that he can offer. a gift that will become within her a spring of life, welling up to eternal life. Dear friends, this is the heart of the gospel. This is what touches me, and this is what I want to share with you. The Lord does not come looking for you because He needs something from you, not because He needs something from us. No, He comes because He has something to give. He comes because He wants to fill our thirst. He brings life into the dry places of our hearts to awaken hope where we may have grown tired or discouraged. The Samaritan woman thought she was searching for water. In reality, it was Christ who was searching for her. The same is true for us, dear friends. The Lord looks for us. He waits for us. Often, He is already present in the very places we pass through every day. There is also another aspect what touches me in this gospel reading. A true encounter leaves both people changed and in some way enriched. This morning's gospel places before us a meeting between two of these people, different tribes, different orientation, different cultures. But what happened? In the world of their time, that differences mattered enormously. There were centuries of suspicions, prejudices, and religious hostility between these two people. Yet, what is striking in the encounter is that Jesus refuses to let those differences define the relationship, define their encounter. He sees beyond them. Before he sees a Samaritan, he sees a human being. Before he sees someone from a rival people, he sees a person who is thirsty. Thirsty for water, thirsty for dignity, thirsty for life. And therefore, I perfectly understand why Jesus would do something remarkable that day. He led her beyond the limit of the world she had always known. He helped her recognize a deeper thirst within herself, a spiritual thirst she had perhaps never named before. Instead of fighting her resistance, Jesus worked patiently with it until the very place of resistance became the opening through which grace could enter. And when we listen to this story today, we must admit that we are not so different. Our world is also full of barriers and resistance. We carry many forms of fear and suspicions in our hearts, prejudices about nationality, race, religion, and culture. There are phobias about migrants, about strangers, intercultural marriages, about those who speak a different language or pray in a different way, about those who don't behave like us. Sometimes we fear what is unfamiliar. Sometimes we build quiet walls around our communities, our traditions, our identities. We forget the deeper truth that lies beneath them all, our shared humanity. If you take blood from a Christian, if you take my blood, if you take a Muslim's blood, a Jewish blood, an African blood, an European blood, an Asian blood, you will just discover the same thing. There is no Christian blood, no Muslim blood, no political blood, no tribal blood. There is simply human blood. The same life flows through all of us. The same dignity given by God belongs to every human being. Therefore, dear friends, Jesus lived his truth long before anyone spoke about it. In speeches or declarations, he had lived it, divisions. By speaking with the Samaritan woman, by asking her for water, by encouraging her in a deep and respectful conversation, he quietly broke through the walls that history had built between their peoples. He revealed that our differences should never imprison us. Instead, we are invited to go beyond them and recognize in one another a shared humanity created and loved by God. In the depth of the well, we are all equal. In the depth of the well, when we are in love, pain, death, decision, joy, we find God. When Jesus sits at the well with the Samaritan woman, he shows us what reconciliation begins to look like. It begins when someone is brave enough to cross a boundary. It begins when someone chooses conversation instead of suspicion, encounter instead of avoidance, oppness instead of fear. At the end, Jesus made the whole encounter to become a moment of grace. Those who are graced by the Lord will want to respond in some way. The woman responded by leaving her water jar and evangelizing her whole town, becoming the evangelist to the Samaritans. If we allow the Lord to meet us where we are and to grace us, we too will want to respond. Our doing for Him, however, will be out of love rather than out of obligation. A loving response to being graced. When we allow ourselves to see one another in that way, something begins to change. The walls become lower. The fear begins to fade, and slowly, like water rising from a hidden spring, the possibility of peace and reconciliation begins to flow among us. Therefore, dear brothers and sisters, perhaps this gospel is asking each of us today, where are the wells in our own lives where such encounters might happen? Where are the places where we might dare to see not levels, not categories, not tribes, but simply another human being created in the image of God? Lent for us is a season when we are invited to get in touch with our own deepest thirst, our own spiritual longings. As difference, as we listen to this beautiful encounter at the well, the liturgy gently leads us to remember something very personal in our own lives, our baptism. Baptism is the beginning of a new life. It is the moment when the living water of Christ was first poured into our hearts. From that moment, a spring began to flow quietly within us, the life of Christ Himself growing in us. Therefore, baptism joins us to that living water. It creates a lasting bond with Christ and draws us into a new family, the community of the church. Through baptism, we are no longer just traveling or passing by the well. We become people in whom the well itself begins to flow. So today's gospel invites us to recognize our own story in the story of the Samaritan woman. We too have met Christ at the well. We too have been offered living water. The living water given to us in baptism, nourished by the Eucharist, is meant to overflow into the lives of others through kindness, through reconciliation, through courage to cross barriers, and through the simple witness of a life touched by Christ. Let us ask the Lord again, give us this living water. Keep that spring alive within us and help us to become people through whom others may also discover the refreshing, life-giving love of God. To all those preparing for baptism in the different parish communities, I wish you good luck and a spirit-filled encounter with the Lord at Easter. And to all my friends, I wish you all a blessed week ahead. God bless you.